Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 795. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Part of every profession is the jargon practitioners adopt. Having a language links people together and creates a sense of community. It also creates private garden, a profession set off from those around it. Jargon is a secret handshake. Jargon is a two-edged sword, both gathering and excluding people. Be wary. We also have a visit from Susan Parente and her Not A Scrumdamentalist column. We discussed her recent mini-sabbatical. Stepping back has the power to clear your mind. Before we get to the essay and our conversation with Susan, I want to remind everyone, slay your work intake chaos. Become a master in 5 weeks. Based on Tom Cagley and WIllet's new book, Mastering Work Intake, learn to diagnose and solve work intake anti-pattern to stop drowning in work. Work intake is the biggest challenge facing organizations today. If you don't get work intake right, you won't be in business for very long. We're offering a 5-week cohort-based class, meeting once a week for an hour, that includes teaching, peer feedback, and discussion. Feedback from Jeremy and myself, questions and answers, templates, and an electronic copy of our book, Mastering Work Intake from Chaos to Predictable Delivery. Are you ready to commit? Join our cohort-based workshop. The first cohort is starting on March 1st. A link to the details in the show notes. A Failure to Communicate, Coaching Basics by Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. Part of every profession is the jargon practitioners adopt. Having a language links people together and creates a sense of community. It also creates private gardens, a profession walled off from those around it. Jargon is a form of secret handshake. Recently, I am the villain in this story, had a conversation with a Scrum Master. We discussed how to use questions, and I used the terms patterns and anti-patterns. It quickly became apparent that they'd never heard the terms before, at least in the context of Agile and software development. I quickly asked around. All of my coaching friends understood the term, but they made sense to very few friends outside the coaching circle. I'm not going to ask why they're not teaching design patterns somewhere, but that's a story for a different day. Patterns in software development, including Agile, refer to well-established, reusable solutions to common problems. Scrum is a pattern. Safe is a pattern. Clean language is a pattern. The factory method is a common design pattern. An anti-pattern is a recurring practice that leads to problems in the long run. Using proxy product owners is an anti-pattern. Daily scrums that happen once or twice a week are anti-patterns. Adopting new patterns generally requires organizational behavioral change. Alternately, adopting anti-patterns are quick fixes or shortcuts that seem efficient and expeditious initially. Returning briefly to my conversation on patterns and anti-patterns. Consider if a manager asked a team member, "Do you agree with my policy to work on production issues because they could relate to human life and safety?" The question is loaded, not psychologically safe. The only safe answer is yes. Loaded questions are an anti-pattern. If the manager intends to make the team member say yes publicly, the approach will more than likely be effective. However, in the long run, that form of manipulation will have an impact on the team. A comparison of a few basic attributes of patterns and anti-patterns suggests why patterns are used to drive behaviors, and also why people stray to the dark side and adopt anti-patterns. Patterns improve the design of code, processes, architecture, and leadership, while anti-patterns worsen it. Patterns are deliberately designed solutions, and anti-patterns are often unintentional results of bad or expeditious practices. That's where people tend to stray to the dark side. Patterns often have documented better alternatives. Alternately, anti-patterns lack established solutions. Patterns are generally viewed as beneficial, while anti-patterns are discouraged. Sometimes that takes people to the dark side. Evaluating techniques, frameworks, reusable design, and more into patterns and anti-patterns is a useful shortcut when deciding on a course of action. Knowing which approaches to behavior, architecture, or code have been effective in the long run reduces waste. Knowing which stink provides value also. The knowledge also allows practitioners to spend more time considering context so they choose wisely. Remember, context is really important on any pattern or anti-pattern. The term pattern and anti-pattern are a form of verbal shorthand for all those concepts. Terms like patterns and anti-patterns are a form of verbal shorthand for all of these concepts. They are jargon. If you are trying to communicate with someone and you use jargon they do not understand or unpack into different concepts, you have a failure to communicate. Thoughts, comments, all welcome. Please feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com. We look forward to the conversation, and we'll try not to use jargon. Susan Parente, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Hi, Tom. It's been a little while. Great to be here again.
I think, well, at least here, we had a winter. It was 3 days long. We got a bit of snow. It got cold, and then it's now just, sort of gray and 30 degrees or 40 degrees. So that's not winter. That's spring, at least here in Northern Ohio.
Well, Punxsutawney Phil said that spring's coming early, and he's only right 40% of the time, but it's probably like most weather people, so it's not too bad.
I actually think weather people, the Weather Service is actually fairly accurate. I mean, Punxsutawney Phil, that just means that it's more chance that it's going to be a long winter, spring is going to be a long way off than it is a near-term thing. Regardless, hey, the last time we talked, you were about to take basically a 1-month sabbatical with, a few caveats here and there, and recharge your batteries. We talked a lot about, in terms of, getting your goals in mind, all of that stuff. How'd it go?
Well, I'm going to say it went well as a general sentiment. I'm going to try for it again this year. It went well, but there's this thing called entropy. So when you create a space, life comes in there. So about 3 weeks into it, a colleague of mine called me and said, "Hey, I'm working on a project, and I could really use like an agile coach that we're using a scrumish type of approach here, type of method. So could really use your help." And he was actually really good about saying like, it's not looking good. Like this project is really in disarray. They were probably 10 months into 11-month project and hadn't delivered like a web page. It was a website update. It's pretty bad.
That's me. That noise you heard was my jaw dropping.
Yeah, it is pretty bad. I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I'm not going to say who the customer was.
Oh, please don't.
So, but I was just like, I didn't know something could get that bad. So anyway, that would be an interesting, we'll have to chat about that. Like how bad can things get and what do you do to fix it? But anyway, so long story short, as I was decompressing, that showed up. And so I could have just been like, well, I need my other 2 weeks or whatever. But I started out with it, and actually I did take, I had a vacation planned in there. So I took a 1-week vacation that I'd like to do. And I finished it off. So it was like, I'll give it like, maybe I got like a B plus as far as my score for my sabbatical. But the good news is I had a slowdown with one of my other projects. And I mean, the challenge is, even though I'm self-employed, I have a 20-hour a week contract that's a commitment. And so I can't just take a month off. But what I ended up doing is I took part of a week from one month and then a week in the next month. And so it kind of like didn't feel as bad to them. And then I cut out everything else. So this year, my plan is to basically in the summer work maybe 30 hours a week through June, July, and August. And again, I'm sure that's not going to happen. But it's the idea. It's the concept of cutting back. And I was able to like decompress and kind of regroup. And I had a really, really busy year. But then I was crazy busy up until Thanksgiving, helping out on that project. And then I took another little hiatus over the holidays. But I actually think it's kind of funny. I think my natural work cadence is to work a ton of hours and then to work very few hours and then work a ton of hours. And it's not, the work environment isn't set up that way. But I wonder sometimes if other people don't have the same cadence, but we have 40-hour a week jobs, so you can't do that. But I do think it's natural when you work really hard to kind of need a break to regroup. I don't have a problem working a lot of hours. I just can't do it forever.
I don't know that anyone can do it forever. Forever is, well, it's a long time. What benefit do you think you really got out of the sabbatical, however one defines a sabbatical?
I think the greatest benefit, to be honest, and I've heard this from other people, is my ability to have boundaries, like to create and hold boundaries. I did decide to do that other work that snuck in there. It was sort of the end of August, but I made the decision to do it. But I said no or later to a lot of other things, and that was hard to do because I'm one of those people that's known for just saying yes and then trying to figure out how to make it work. And that's a good thing, but it can be bad because me saying yes has an impact to my family, to other work commitments, things like that. And I run out of bandwidth, so it is a real thing. And so I've been trying to not say no, but maybe it's not now, so that for me was the biggest challenge about it. I'm always just, sure, I'll do that. Sure, I'll do that. And I had to kind of, well, I can do it before then or after. I mean, there were other things that came up that I did not say yes to. And I had move around my schedule, and that was challenging, but it worked. And I thought that was really what the most that I got out of it was my ability to take ownership for that and not just say yes.
That sounds remarkably like a work intake kind of thing. Yeah. So maybe someday we can talk about work intake. I might have an opinion or two on that. So you're going to do it again. What are you going to do differently?
What am I going to do differently? That's a good question.
Well, you mentioned one, right? You're going to bank off some hours and, overproduce in the months running up to it, and then use that to, draw down so you don't have to, spend 20 hours or half the time somewhere else.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's going to be kind of, instead of like a true, like totally not working sabbatical, it'll be like a partial working sabbatical. And I think my boundaries will be, maybe I'll work like 7 to 12 day and then stop work then and then not pick up my laptop later. Like it'll be a different kind of, it won't be a true sabbatical not working at all, but that's what it looks like will work this year. But I always take Labor Day week off. I really like to take that week, and it's a staycation. And that will still be my decompression, the end of the summer kind of thing, which is good. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge, and I don't know if the listeners know, but like I teach at a few different universities. And so difficult to just not do that for a month, right? I can't just, if you say no to teaching the class, then you won't get it again. So, that's the challenging part. So I think this year it's going to be kind of like a sabbatical by working half days kind of thing. And then the rest of the day, I want to use that to read, to write, finish my book, things like that. I never really got to that. I was still in decompression. I didn't get to let me work on my book part of it. But that has been a thought of mine for many years to scale back and spend more time writing. And I still have thoughts about that. Maybe in a semi-retirement, because that's the next thing up for me is a semi-retirement. But I won't fully retire till 72, but I'm going to semi-retire.
So what?
Early.
How you're planning 50 years in the future?
No, I actually financially want to plan to semi-retire in like the next 5 years, but I'll probably keep working if work shows up. But it's just it would be nice to be able to say no just because I don't need the money and just do the things that I really like to do. And if I'm doing the things I like to do when I like to do them, I'm retired anyway, even if I'm working. So that's kind of.
What are you going to do to find the space to do the writing? So comes to your sabbatical time, you want to wrestle with, I know you're writing 2 books right now. How are you going to find that space? You didn't find the space this time. What are you going to do differently?
Good questions. You're good job with the questions today, Tom. Well, one of the things that sparks the ability for me to write and my passion for writing is being outside, which is probably one of the reasons I want to. Well, there's a few reasons I want to do a sabbatical in the summer, because I don't really care for the winter, so I may as well work. It's like my version of hibernate. Like why waste my time, my sunshine and beautiful daytime to work in the summer when I could work in the winter when it's really not pleasant out. But yes, being outside, being in nature. So I do have this vision of sitting outside with the laptop, finding a somewhat shady spot so I don't get the screen reflection, and looking at nature and writing. And actually, one of the ways that I've been writing recently, like articles, I'll do voice to text on my phone, and then I'll email it to myself and then clean it up. And there's something about everybody has abilities to write like in a different way, like whatever works for them. For me, if I speak, I'm more able to put together thoughts than if I just am silent and I type. And so I've just learned this about myself. So if I speak my words, my writing is a lot smoother and a lot quicker. And I've gotten to the point now I can write a blog article in probably about 30 minutes. And it takes me going for a walk and then sitting down at a bench or something and voice to text, send myself the email, go back to my office, clean up all the things that don't work well on voice to text. And I've got like 300 to 600 word article. I mean, it's kind of nice to know I can do that. Yeah, it's nice to know I can do that. But I think it's like everybody has to find what works for them. Like some people have to go to a coffee shop or get out of their house or whatever. So,
I think I was sitting next to the person who was doing voice to text in a coffee shop the other day. She has some extraneous words in her text now. Helped her. I'm sorry. There are places where things are appropriate. There are places where they're not.
Yes.
Just like the guy the other day who was taking a call from the men's room in one of the stalls. It's like in Houston's airport.
Yeah, I've taken a call in the bathroom, but not in the stall. So, like at the sink maybe. So
yeah, it is. We live in a fun world. So
it's very interesting.
On the topic of the sabbatical, would you recommend it for other people?
I certainly would. I'm glad you asked that. So I actually listened to a woman talk about doing it herself, and she also had her own business. And a lot of people think, oh, well, if you have your own business, it's easier to do. Yeah, thank you for that. Like, it's harder if you have your own business to do that. It really is. If you've been working someplace for a long time, I think that you could probably find, what's the cadence for your workplace and say, I'd really like to take a month off and here's my plan and when would be the best time to do it and have that conversation. And I mean, if you've just started working there, it's probably not going to happen, but I would say it's might be easier if you've been working someplace for a while. When you have your own business, what's hard about that is what people who don't have their own business don't know is that people come to you and say, "Do you want to do this?" And if you say no, it's not like they're going to do it later. They're going to
No, they're going to go
else.
somewhere else. Generally.
Yeah. So you probably have not only lost that business but lost future business. There's some exceptions to that. Like the one thing I worked around was a colleague of mine I'd worked with for years, and I just said, I'm planning to take off then. He's like, the whole month? And I was like, yes, the whole month. So it's like, okay, here, how can we make this work? And so there were things I did before and there were things I did after, and we made it work. But it's a lot harder when you have your own business, believe it or not. Because
you're preaching to the choir here.
Because you basically have to take a month off with like 6 or 7 different people. Like you have to I got to get every university to agree with it and all those things. And so, yeah, it was really challenging. But one of the things that happened with the universities, I actually had an opportunity to teach a class, and it was not a class I'd taught before. Kind of really didn't want to teach the class because I would have had to like learn the class to teach it. Classes I've taught before are easy to teach. And I went to my supervisor and said, "Hey, I'm not really jazzed about teaching this class. Like, do you really need me to teach it, or is there someone else you can find?" It's like, "Oh, I was just offering it to you because I didn't want to give you a semester without a class." I said, "No, actually, that works out really well for me this semester to not teach. Don't forget about me next semester, but you can find somebody else." And so it was interesting because like he was trying to give me a class and I actually really didn't want one. And so that's some examples of what happens, but I had to do that with like 5 or 6 people. Like it's a lot. It's a lot when you have your own business. So as crazy as it seems, if you're full-time employed with one boss, one company, you just sit down and have the conversation. And I don't know, I don't know you have to tell them what you want to do with your 1 month sabbatical, but if you want to sit at the pool and, get a tan, I think that's okay too. But I do think there's something about stepping away. This is why, religious people do retreats. Sabbatical is like a work version of a retreat. And a lot of times to get perspective on things, you do have to step away. I know for me that the boundary thing was what was really valuable, is actually trying to make it work. Trying to actually get a month off was the hardest part about it. But I'm very, very happy I did it. I'm going to do it a little bit different this year. And, I recommend it. If you don't think you could do a month, try 3 weeks.
Yeah. I took my first 3-week vacation this year, ever. And I've been in the workplace for, a few years. Susan, how would people continue the conversation? How would they find out about Susan Parente and all of the wonderful things she does?
Oh, yes. LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. It's list me as in Washington, D.C. Do work in D.C. I do work in the New York area. I actually live kind of between the two. It won't let me do 2 different areas, unfortunately. Maybe LinkedIn will update that one day. But since most of us are virtual anyway, but find me on LinkedIn. Or you can email me. It's Parente, Parente at S as in Sam, the number 3-tec.com for my company S3 Technologies. And look forward to hearing from you.
In Reread Saturday News, this week we tackle 2 chapters of Actionable Agile Metrics Volume 2 Advanced Topics in Predictability by Daniel Vacante. We begin with Chapter 9, Voice of Process, Voice of Customer, and Predictability, which sums up Section 1. variability and predictability. Chapter 10 is titled Monte Carlo Simulation Revisited, which begins Section 2, Advanced Monte Carlo Simulation and Predictability. Link in the show notes to buy a copy of Mr. Vacante's book. I really do recommend this. And to all of the entries in our current reread of Actionable Agile Metrics Volume 2. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 796, we will have a conversation with Roger Turno. Roger and I delve deeply into prioritization using the cost of delay. Every organization and team I've ever worked with has a backlog with work and lots of people screaming that their piece of the backlog is the most important. Do you hear the phrase work intake there? Cost of delay is an important tool to filter out the noise. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?